welcome back to the Think Bunker. This is part 2 of our evolution of the medium tank bunker brief. Now, if you're a first time viewer, welcome to the channel. This is the kind of content we like to make, but also we make other forms of content, so go check that out. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. We appreciate you guys sticking around and just enjoying our content. Now, with that said, let's get into it. This video will go over the mid-late war universal tank concepts, explanations of what that is, the universal tank. Yeah, I'll explain that in the video moving forward. And the Cold War MBTs and ending with the modern day MBTs. Last video we discussed the interwar tank designs and the early war tank designs. So with that in mind, enjoy the video. Now we get to the mid-late war universals. Now, quick thing, definitions. So, I looked up the definition for a universal tank. I looked up the definition of a MBT. They're almost the exact same thing. So, if anything, it goes by era. So, medium tanks as a whole, as far as the Second World War goes, you have this idea that you have light tanks that are fast, move around lines, flank shots, that whole thing, fast, sneaky sort of thing. You have mediums, then you have heavies that it's big, big, strong, take a lot of hits, give a lot of damage, but are very slow and essentially meant to be moving fortifications. And then you have mediums, only there to really support the heavies and to only really there to really support the heavies and are in the middle. They have decent armor, decent speed, decent guns. And then you have TDs, tank destroyers, that are there to, oh, there's a heavy tank, tank destroyer, kill the heavy, that sort of thing. However, that kind of notion fell off by at least for some nations, early on. Well, one nation early on, and kind of mid-war, that notion started falling off because Britain finally designed and produced actually a pretty capable medium, which really, if anything, was just a heavier cruiser tank that became it was just a chunkier cruiser, and by extension was a medium at that point. And these vehicles started doing a very big funny. The U.S. is a good case study of this, outperforming the tank destroyers. As far as dealing with heavy armor goes, tank destroyers would, in cases of the U.S., would be called up to doctrinally were to be called up to deal with heavy tanks. But by the time they got there, the medium tanks were already gone. They're far past the heavy. They had already destroyed it, and just either by I have high explosives, let's just shoot it till it dies, or flank around. We can move, and then they kill the heavy, and then they leave. And a lot of times the U.S. tank destroyers were so just not even required in a lot of situations. Even in the times where tank destroyers were called to aid in heavy tank destruction, they were called in, but really only there as additional armored support. They weren't really there to deal exclusively with a heavy tank, because the mediums were already doing that. They were just there as an extra gun. In fact, in situations where medium tanks were better suited in other areas of the battle map, they needed light infantry escort, they would send the tank destroyers in as light infantry escort, because the medium tanks are just better used where there's actual armor, because they're more versatile. And so with that in mind, this is where you get the universal idea. No longer, and the heavy tank idea was already starting to show a lot of wear from its inception, but here it starts to get painfully obvious. Heavy tanks are not really useful anymore. Go watch What is a Tank to get more details on that. And that idea falls off because, in short, you create a heavy tank design, and congratulations, in 6 months, its armor advantages are at its limit. And you can't put any more armor in this thing before the running gear just breaks, and you need to design a whole new heavy. And now this thing has a lot more resources to build it, and yet it's not really worth it. So, as a whole, this is where the universal tank idea comes from. A vehicle that could no longer need, you don't need TDs, you don't need heavy tanks to support the mediums or mediums to support the heavies. These vehicles can dispose, if a threat arrives on the battlefield, you can dispatch of it with I wouldn't say relative ease, but you can in reason you can reasonably dispatch of it, unless it's a Yag Tiger. Then you don't even engage it. You just call in the P-47s to hit it with a fighter bomber wave because nothing's getting through that. And with that in
Yeah,
mind,
just call artillery and
yeah,
every bomber you
yeah,
have.
artillery command. We want you to destroy this little section on the battle map. What target are you striking? That grid square. Because there's a Yak Tiger. Yeah, understood. We're gonna throw everything we got at it. We got an A bomb. Anyways, my point being that universals became this idea where medium tanks would just take over the role of the tank destroyer. Started to expose the redundancies in the tank destroyer and the flaws in the heavy tanks.
Mm-hmm. Though this era of tank design would be marred with a couple of issues, mostly due to definitely different but oddly similar uh, decisions. So after the invasion of Normandy, someone in Ordnance Branch, who shall not be named, decided it would be a really, really funny idea if they send a few prototype tanks into Europe to see how
Uh,
they do.
oh,
Now,
Operation Zebra. Oh, that thing.
uh, on paper, that's a fine statement. We have a prototype. It would be interesting to test it. However, the tank was not ready to go, and they
And
said ship it anyway.
in fact, they would and when overseas, the ordnance department, while overseas, would try to shove this vehicle into any situation possible to the detriment of the overall operation, to the overall mission. The tanks we're referring to is the M26 Pershing in the middle right, and the compared to the M4 Sherman in the bottom left there. So yeah,
It and unfortunately for the Pershing, it didn't perform well. Logistics was unable to take care of this thing. It was not ready to cross bridges. Its parts were basically non-existent, and you'd be unable to repair this thing if it broke,
which it
except for the
did,
parts that shipped with it, because
relatively often.
logistics had the parts for Shermans. They had it for M18s, M10s. Yeah, we got the parts for it. M26, never heard of it.
Right. Furthermore, the M26 is a very good design, but we'll relegate that to another video for time reasons. But all in all,
The
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 long and short of it is that the M26 was an overall design, as a basic design concept goes, is a much better vehicle than the M4. Lower profile, more robust turret for a bigger gun, and a more capable gun too. However, its automotive issues couldn't be solved. It actually lacked a stabilizer that the M4 had. It wasn't a true stabilizer, but a mechanical stabilizer. It just lacked a lot of. It lacked reliability. That's all it said. It couldn't. It never really truly replaced the M4. The vehicle, the medium vehicle to, or you could say the respective medium to replace the M4 would be the M46. The Pershing never really replaced the Sherman because the Sherman could out reliability the M26 every time. Okay, unless it was which one could penetrate raw armor more. But my point being that the M4 would outperform the Pershing in almost every scenario.
stick the 90 mil in a Sherman. It'll be fine.
Oh no, no, not that thing. Shut.
Nah, it'll be fine. Just stick it in sideways. Pretend it's a Firefly.
Yeah, pretend it's a fireplay. Have the worst crew spacing issues ever. That thing, that thing's awful. I almost,
But
I
in a
despise it.
similar vein, the Panther on paper, as far as a mid-war design and as a universal tank, which it was kind of supposed to be, um, where, or at least how it was supposed to fit into the German army. However, this tank had a lot of very serious mechanical issues and a lot of glaring oversights that 100% should have been checked before these things left the factory. Um, they performed between okay and terribly. They performed good to terribly. Usually, depending on outside environments. Um, as in poor logistics was involved, poor crew training, um,
Lackluster,
inexperienced crews,
lackluster ammunition.
lackluster ammunition, um, production defects at the factory. Not a problem with the design, but still the factory shipped out a very um, flawed product. You would get weak spots in the armor. Some of
Lack
the
of
armor
qual,
was extremely brittle.
lack of quality materials used in said armor.
The major design problem with the Pershing is what won its final drive, which is just not up to snuff as a
Actually,
design.
uh, isn't it the Panther? The final drive was the big issue on the Panther. The Pershing, it was the gears and the
I've
transmission.
been talking about the Panther for the past 5 minutes.
And then you said the issue with the Pershing was the final drives.
Oh, my bad. I meant Panther. Yeah, Panther. Pershing's final drive is fine. Panther's final drive, not good. Not it, Chief. And
Both in material and design. And the Pershing's issue was the gears and the transmission.
correct. The Panther, you need to drive it like you're driving a very nice sports car, but not a fast sports car, like a luxury car. You need to be gentle with it. You need to be very kind to the final drive. A lot of the crews were not very fine with the drive because they're not trying to park this thing for a driver's test. They're in a war,
Yeah.
and they would slam on brakes. They would try to do stuff that they're really not supposed to do in Panthers, and it would shred the final drives.
They would essentially put,
The
as you do in combat, they put this design to its limit. And its limit wasn't high.
the armor on the sides is just way too thin. Some spots can even be penetrated by incoming artillery fragmentation and 50 cal fire, which is an absolute no. You need to be 50 cal rated as a vehicle.
That is why
Um,
that's
the
why the Panzerskirchen was added on to these head Panthers to block that sort of stuff from happening. And that's the whole reason why the Panther 2 started production or started research. But then probably some redneck German was like, oh look, yeah, Panzerskirchen, and then the Panther 2 was just immediately canceled.
well, they were still going to try to make it, but I mean, they were on the doorsteps of Berlin, and the thing had half a wooden mock-up. The
Yeah,
the Panther, the adding the Panzerskirchen just made the transmission issues even worse with a
yeah.
final drive because it's more weight.
And then even
But
its upper hull armor with the. And yeah, actually, we could save this for the video on the German tanks. We'll save it for then there.
it had a few problems, but it was an overall sensible design. You could see where they were going with it.
You can see they were cooking with the design.
Yeah, they were cooking. They were just adding
Someone
sugar
turned
instead of salt.
and someone turned off the heat whenever they went to actually build the thing.
Uh-huh.
But with that said,
Similar story with the T-34-85. and
Oh,
some of the
we
later T-34 with the long barrel 76s.
yeah, but we can that rant, that whole spiel will is deserving of its own video. We won't even start on that as of now. Um, I'm good with this slide. How about yourself?
Do you want to talk about the comment? Because I kind of want to talk about the comment.
Um, we're a bit crunched for time, dude. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, so we will talk about them in their respective videos. Sweet. Cold War MBTs. So, the Cold War MBTs are the culmination of the ideology of the Universal. Now it's this. The Universal tank was a sort of unspoken rule that tanks, medium tanks, would become essentially. You know, we don't need tank destroyers. Heavy tanks are impractical, and the Cold War MBTs were the taking that to heart. This then became the rule. Tank destroyers gone. They're complete. They're just completely out of service. No one even thinks about them anymore. Now the only way they exist is in something, say, an M9 throughout history is in very uh small capacity, but mostly as ATGM launchers, really. But that would be later into the 60s and the 80s,
Which
which
vehicle did you say?
I wasn't referring the M901, like and even then they were just modified
Yeah.
pre-existing vehicles with they just strapped a tow missile launcher to an elevating platform on the M901. Well, two of them actually. But the point is, tank destroyers as we know them in the Second World War no longer exist. Those rolling, basically gun carrying vehicles, just you don't need them anymore. Ammunition, powdering, right, boring, and ammunition technologies has advanced to a point that you just simply don't need it. And this is where Cold War MBTs come about. It's essentially that you can, if there's an armored threat or any threat on the battlefield, within reason, you could kill it. And that was the job of this vehicle. One of the notable features of this, apart from a few designs, they removed the hull machine gun. This is for two reasons. One, three. Production. You don't have to fit a hull with a machine gun port, the machine gun, and so on and so forth. Also, kind of logistics is it's a relief on that. Two, you don't need as much ammo for that hull machine gun, or that same ammo can just go to the bow gun. And three, it frees up space inside the vehicle because unlike what the Soviets believed, crews like to be comfortable.
No, cram them into sardine can.
Cram them into sardine can with a hatch barely bigger than a letterbox to get out of.
Throw your troops into fireflies. They will appreciate it.
Don't give them a chair. I feel so bad for the T-34 bow gunner.
Dude, I feel so bad for the Japanese tankers. A lot. So the Chihuahuas, they don't have turret baskets,
Oh, yeah, that's rough.
and like for the Hago, the drive shaft is literally running through the compartment.
I mean, that would be excusable for a design of that period, but for the T-34, that's a lot less excusable.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was the size, not the uh, drive shaft running um, through the crew um,
Compartment, yeah. A
compartment.
lot of things are less excusable on the T-34, but my point being that the whole thing with Cold War MBTs is the rule of as essentially you walk your commander and you walk up to your medium, you say you should be able to kill anything on the battlefield within reason. That is the rule, and these vehicles are the ones to do it.
Hmm. And when we say within reason, like heavily damage another tank, destroy technicals, destroy pillboxes, destroy stuff that your troops might come into contact with within reason. If your enemy shows up and they're like hiding behind a tungsten cube, you're not designed to shoot through that. Just just ignore it.
Yeah, but
But
also, I'm sorry, but I forgot to mention advanced technology. This is where you start getting practical infrared rangefinders. I wouldn't say ballistic computers. Yeah, but stabilizers. You start getting those in the
Um,
field.
yes, yet for a couple of these get ballistic computers, but they were primarily stuck on prototype versions of these tanks.
Right.
I know the
Essentially.
M48 had a ballistic computer in it at some point,
Oh yeah, it did. But all
and
in
I
all,
think the T55, one of the T55 variants has a ballistic computer. I think.
its advancements with infrared night vision, that whole thing that was experimented with in the Second World War, First World War. Yeah, the FT-17 had night vision. Um, a little known fact, guys. Uh, However, you start getting more advanced like, to help the crew out. This is when vehicles, kind of for the Soviets, but as a whole, other nations started building vehicles that would complement with equipment that would complement the crew, i.e., night vision, infrared, the
Commanders, commanders sights, cameras.
commander override for the turret, which the Americans have been doing since 1941.
Did the Pershing? No, I don't think the Pershing had a commander override.
I believe it did.
Okay, that's for another time. But a couple. I probably since we're talking about like optical equipment, even as far back as early war tanks, they were technically putting night vision on vehicles, but it was very, very bad.
You
It
can
didn't
barely.
matter who it was making it. Germany did have night vision technology. It sucked.
America,
Um,
America makes.
America mounted night vision tech on Shermans
It
at
was bad. It
Aberdeen
was
Proving Ground.
bad.
It sucked. There's a the report out there from the the report from that test basically said one, vision is horrible. Two, this thing costs more than the tank itself.
Right, and three,
They
if you
were
run over a slight bump, you break the whole thing.
they were basically using an IR illuminator, and it was not it. The
But
I know people are always ogle over stuff like the Panther getting the night vision, but it was for very short ranges, and it was basically unnecessary. You're not seeing out into the other end of the field.
in fact,
Um,
relying on on World War II era IR was essentially a detriment more than a benefit.
it was wasting resources, was is what it was.
Right, but then that research
The
develops over the course of a couple decades, or not decades, but I mean through some decades, and then you get to your 60s, your 70s. This is where you start
you
getting
get Gen One thermals,
Gen 1
so
thermals.
nice.
Oh yes, absolutely.
No, Gen One thermals. So like
That's what
Gen
I'm
One
saying.
thermal imaging.
That's what I'm
The
saying. Gen 1 thermals.
yeah, those would start appearing. Um, the Russians would still try to use the IR spotlights, which is that little disc on the T-55 bottom right. Um, but even they eventually would jump on the thermal bandwagon. Everyone would get thermals.
Mm. But
Although, like, Commander's independent thermal sight was not really a thing.
there's more
Or,
so
like,
there's more so the gunner could scan for an enemy target with that thing.
yeah, your Commander's still got a. He might have a Commander override, but he's using the vision blocks or sticking his head out of the tank.
Hmm. But all in all, this is the Cold War MBTs are the culmination of the years of painstaking research, development, and trial and error from the Second World War into Korea. With that said, that's all I have for this slide. All right, modern MBTs. This is peak, peak mediums because these are the current MBTs for their respective nations. Um, Essentially, modern MBTs are all that tech we were talking about earlier, ballistic computers, IR, night vision, thermals, that whole thing. Um, Hydraulic suspension, blowout panels. That those would be added on. This is it, Chief. This vehicle is these vehicles are your most advanced vehicles. Um, these are your most advanced vehicles that you would ever get, and these are peak of technological design.
Yeah, these things are walking, basically driving computers.
And
They've
also
got commanders
with it,
independent thermal sights. They've got anti-drone capabilities with basically microwave emitters on them. They've got um, uh, ERA. They've got automatic smoke dischargers, laser warning receivers.
I think the M1 Abrams has an upgrade package that will allow it to link to a drone in the sky, an observation drone, and will essentially give it wall hacks.
Um, they're talking about it.
Right. Well, it's an idea that's floating around.
Yeah, the KF-51 is supposed to come out with that.
Mm.
And the T-14 was supposed to have that. Basically, it would be like a drone on a tether. And then that would fly up, and you would get a very nice horizon view above the T-14. However, I haven't seen anyone use that, and the T-14's never getting produced in
Yeah.
actual mass production. The Russians have effectively canceled the thing, which is
Yeah.
like it is what it
Yeah.
is.
But even then, we don't even know much about the T14 as a whole. Like we can make and all these capabilities we talk about with the vehicles are like either stuff we've seen or have heard about with vehicles, but whether they get implemented is a great question. Is great question because especially with the C14 there, it's we just don't know about some of these things, especially with the T14. We just don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, it's always been like a big guess of what the Abrams is actually made out of.
Yeah, most of what we talk about, sure, we can talk about. Oh, it has advanced ballistic computers. What are its capabilities? Great question. It has pretty good composite armor. What are its capabilities? Great question. Right? We don't exactly know.
Yeah, we don't know how they make it.
Things are
Uh,
classified for a reason, boys and girls.
do not leak classified
Yeah,
details.
do not leak classified military documents. I mean, I'd like to have it, but do not leak classified military documents. It's kind of turbo illegal.
Mm-hmm. And at this at this point, with the sort of tanks being tank destroyers themselves, we have a very weird arms race going on right now as to how to make these things survivable and actually perform on the battlefield as a tank. And hot take, I'm not really sure if that's like something that can even work.
Mm.
The with weapons as lethal as they are now, with ATGMs just everywhere, you can tote one on your back, an anti-tank guided missile. You can blow up a tank from half a mile away with just like four dudes toting in um, an ATGM launcher.
Heck, we had that kind of capability back in the '80s. Well, at least the U.S. did.
Yeah, but the question is, now that everyone has it, what do tanks need to look like? And honestly, they might it might be a good idea to start shedding, um, basically moving back towards lighter tanks that are cheaper to produce
Mm-hmm.
and easier to field.
Essentially,
Because
these kind of vehicles that we have now are just glorified, kind of a mix of all classes. Like sure they're speedy, and they're multi role like a medium, but I mean these things are kind of designed to take hits like a heavy, right? That was it was
well,
with
that's what
survivability
they're
stuff like it.
supposed to do.
Right, but then now that's been called into question with the extremely advanced systems that we have. So, if anything, avoiding the shot in the first place would be more practical. But again, we don't know. We just do not know.
Well, it might come to pass that tanks start diverging from looking like they are now to something much more archaic, basically a cheaper paladin like system or cheaper Mista B system, just as a direct fire SPG that's
Mm-hmm.
cheaper to produce. Screw the thermals, screw the commander overrides. We move back towards simpler times,
I would
but I
say
just don't
that
know.
my prediction would be that if anything, the changes they'd make is say going the route of like an M10 Booker, where that would become your MBT, where they're just lighter. They're just lighter and faster, and but they're
Lighter,
able to
faster, cheaper.
cheaper to produce since they're lighter and faster. But you keep your thermals and your night vision and stuff like that, so you can see still essentially you can perform like an MBT. You're just straight up lighter.
You're easier to maneuver around on the battlefield. It's easier to get them to the battlefield. They're
And
less of a
avoid the
logistical
shots.
strain.
And
And the thing is, your opponent might think about not using particular weapons on it because it is just so cost ineffective to shoot one.
correct. So with that said, essentially this section of the medium tank video is, well, we'll just have to see because I don't know about you. I'm not exactly in the U.S. Defense Department.
I'm from the future.
Right. So, with that said, that's all I have for this video.
Oh, also shout out to William Collins.
Oh yes.
Thank you for watching in the comments. Thank you.
Furthermore, we actually could you go if you're done here, you want to move to the last slide. So, with that said, thank you for watching. William, the reason why the next video wasn't the evolution of shotguns was because this video was already in production by the time you had suggested that. Great suggestion, by the way. Yeah, we're doing that idea next. We're doing shotguns, bud.
We listen to those who watch.
Yeah, with
We're
that
doing it.
aside, seriously, if you have an idea, say the evolution of the pistol, evolution of here's a good one. The evolution of backpacks and like field gear. Tell us. Let us know. Like, put a comment. The evolution of, shoot, light tanks or whatever. Just if you have an idea, let us know, and uh, we'll see the practicality and the schedule. We'll see if we can fit it into the schedule. Another thing is if you want to see an animated video like a Cologne video, like the Cologne video we did, the Battle of Cologne, not we didn't do a scent review of colognes. We're not exactly sprawling with cash here. I spent most of that on scratchers. But anyways, so
What?
shh. But with that said, I didn't say that. With that said, let us know your ideas, your thoughts, your opinions. If you have suggestions, please let us know. Don't forget to like and I gotta do the basic YouTuber thing. Don't forget to like and subscribe. But Kento, you have any final words you want to leave our viewers with?
Um, I don't pay y'all anything. Now get back to work.
That's my line.
Thank y'all for coming, and